Hello, friends. David Vos here. Well, I'm back. I was off for 7 days, and we're hoping that this will load. I haven't even tried it, but I think it's time. I'm going to load this video. Um, yeah, they shut me down for a week. Now, you know, for those of you who have just tuned in and never heard any of my videos, or very few of them, this probably will be boring, the first little part of this video, because I'm just kind of explaining a few things that happened. So for those of you who are interested in primarily just hearing the info, because this information that I'm going to give, I mean, I've been off for a week and went up with my daughter, had a little sabbatical, and the Holy Spirit's been working with me, and I feel that I have to get a little deeper into some things. It's come to my mind, to my attention, that there are some things that we don't understand, and I think my mind has come up with a way, or the Holy Spirit has shown me a way that I can explain something a little deeper than we have already gone heretofore. And I don't want to make this first part boring, because I'm hearing that people just click off because my videos start off boring. So let me tell you, friends, for those of you who've just tuned in, don't turn this off if you're really searching for the truth. And if you're really trying to find information you've never heard before. I mean, you've heard it all before, right? I mean, it's either somebody hollering on the street demanding that you, read all about it, extra, come down and join our church, and all the other churches are evil, and it's always usually some deal where, you shave your head and you wear a white robe, or you do a little dance, or, alakazam, all these weird dunk in the water 3 times, do this on your forehead, and say the magical words. Some people have magic wands. I suppose, that's what people believe Christianity is supposed to be. Rituals. And that's not the truth. But it's the same with all the religions, friends. And this is what I've been trying to tell you. And this offends a lot of people. I can offend just about anybody I want to by telling them the truth. But I don't want to offend anyone, friends. I want to tell you the truth. And the truth is going to be something that probably anybody could find out. The problem is that truth is something that you haven't heard from your world around you. So when you hear the truth, it's foreign. Anybody can find the truth. You can look it up in a dictionary. You can look it up in the encyclopedia. It's all out there. And recently, by some sheer coincidinky-dink, in 1948, Israel becomes a nation. And 1947, which is actually when they went, there's other things going on in different dates. But in 1947, they dug up the Nag Hammadi Library. I think it's 1945, they dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, isn't this interesting? Because Roswell had an alien crash in 1948. And the war ended, and Tesla gave our government a bunch of information, and now we're building satellites. And so at the very moment that the space age begins, or modern technology that we got from Germany that was brought over here in Project Paperclip, and Tesla, and all of these things that's been going on, cars, and now technology, and cameras, and the 5G, and all this stuff. Well, at the very same moment, coinkadinkly, we start digging up the ancient scrolls, the ancient wisdom. And at the very same moment, we find a stela that is, that just out of nowhere, we find this rock that has 3 different languages on it that were couple of them were dead languages that we did not understand, like the Egyptian language. And now because it had with it a language beside it, like an interlinear, that we did know or understand, we thought, we were able to interpret and decipher the ancient hieroglyphs. And this is all happening about the same time. Now we're beginning to decipher and decode cuneiform. And now all of this light is coming, information is coming to light. And of course, it was years before we actually started reading about it. Books were coming out like Don Bonnick and Chariots of the Gods and Belankowski and Sitchin and all of these. This information was coming out and we didn't know what to do with it. We were trying to put it together. And so you have certain individuals like David Icke and others that were trying to interpret some of this, and people were like, oh my goodness. And of course, Christians, as they always have done, because they're all part of the World Council of Churches, they band together and basically told their flock, and every day, you're going to hell if you read this stuff. This is all pagan. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Well, why has Christ got a halo? Why does, the Trinity, why is that pagan? Why is there a virgin birth? Isn't that pagan? Why? The Old Testament says don't worship idols. And why does Christians have idols of Mary? And there was all these questions. Why are, people told us that the true God, why you're supposed to rest on the Saturday. And of course, the pagans do it on Sunday. It's like all the pagans, right? And they just make it so simple. Just voila. See how you're supposed to remain doing what the government and your religion tells you, and don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, because he's pulling the levers back there and he's just an old man. He doesn't know what he's doing. But they don't want you to know that. So, what I'm going to share with you guys in this video, I think, is some information you probably haven't heard ever. Some of you have, because it's hard enough for us to read the Bible. A couple of you wanted to see if you could sit down and finish the whole Bible. You probably didn't do it. And some of you said, well, you should read the Nag Hammadi library. That's the Gnosticism. And if you get brave enough to go out there and start looking into it, at first you're going to get confused. It's very difficult for the average person to get through all of this. You're starting with blank, with a clean slate, and you really don't know what to believe except for what you've been told. And they put fear into you. You're going to hell if you do this and if you believe this, and we don't even realize that we're still under a hard, possessive, controlling religion. Well, I'm not religious, Dave. I believe in the government. That's religion. In other words, you have been told what to believe. You believe in doctors, do you not? Why, of course, Dave. Well, they're scientists. Why, they know what they're talking about. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Really? Well, why is there more people dying of malpractice than are dying of disease? Anyway. It is very difficult to navigate, because the world has become a place where the ruling authority has put us in a control. So a lot of people say, well, how? I don't understand why God did this to us. Why we don't know what to do. We don't know what to believe. We don't know, I'm so confused. I'm searching. Well, here's the thing. You don't really have to search. See, that's the big deal. That's the big hoax. You got to be careful what you say here. I don't want to get shut down again. But let me put it this way. The way that our Father in heaven made us is pure. You don't have to worry about dying, because we're immortal. You are loved. Our Father in heaven is love. There is no darkness in him at all. There's no evil. He doesn't tempt anybody with evil like that God did in the garden. Nor can he be tempted with evil himself, the Bible says. The New Testament says he's a light. He dwells in unapproachable light. That's enlightenment, truth, love. Not only is he light, but he's spirit and he's love. And spirit means mind. And if he is mind and he is love and he is light, then all three of those things are the same. So spirit, which is the invisible thing within you that's alive forevermore, which is your spirit, which is your being, which is your real self, that's the same as light. It's enlightenment. It's reality. And you are it. You don't need to search for it. You are it. The problem is when you start not looking at yourself, you don't look at reality, you don't see the truth, you don't let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. It's so simple, they put it in a song. And when we heard it, we thought, oh, that's profound, right? Let it be. I am, therefore, I think, therefore I am. These were, know thyself, oh man. All these grand and wise statements sprinkled throughout our education, but yet meaningless because we were brainwashed into being told either if you were secular that religion was garbage, that they didn't tell you about esoteric wisdom. They just told you about these rituals. Oh, that's all wrong. Of course it is. And yet you still go to the church every morning and, do your little thimble of wine and, wafer and dunk in the water and all this, abracadabra, shazam, and you're saved, right? That's the ritualistic religion. Temples, man-made temples and robes and ceremony, all of that, that's Christianity. We're fighting against the pagans and the idolaters, and we're the idolaters. But you see, this is what we're about to do in this video. We're about to show you how that all happened. How we could be believing the absolute opposite in just about everything that we believe, and the truth is somewhere else. Absolutely the opposite of what we think. And I'm going to show you the roots of Christianity. I'm going to show you the fact. I'm going to show you that from your own scriptures, that the God of Jesus, his heavenly Father, if you could read it in its actual Koine Greek or in the real actual Hebrew, the paleographic Hebrew, you would see a lot more truth. You would find the truth. You would know the truth. You would know that all of these gods, they're not even, it's not the worship of a god, any god, that is wrong or that ever was wrong. Because there are divine, originally the truth is that the truth was written down in a mystery. The apostle said, notice how I understand the mysteries. And I speak concerning Christ and his church. When he was talking about a wedding, a man and a woman, he says, I speak concerning Christ and his church. In other words, the church was the woman. It was a symbol of something. What is this temple? This man-made temple we've got to go and worship, and it's got this curtain, and you can't go behind the curtain, and only the priest could go back. Well, that represents the body, the universe. And the veil represents the ignorance that we're in. And the priesthood represents the fact that you can't get to God. Oh, well, there you go, Dave. You see, we don't know the truth. We can't know the truth because God hadn't revealed it yet. Well, yes, he did. From the very beginning. It's in you. The problem is there's a veil. What's the veil? It's ignorance. And what's the ignorance? It's the ego. It's that part of you that wants to be deceived or allows your mind to be deceived by the glitter, by selfishness, by the lower carnal nature. And so the Bible, whether it's the old or the new, is a book of symbols to explain the universe. It's not there to tell us about bearded men floating on yonder sky. That is idolatry. And so when the people in like Elijah and the prophets, when were upset about people being idolaters, it wasn't that they were worshiping another God that wasn't Yahweh. Why, Israelites worshipped, the Jewish religion knows very well and has in the Jewish scriptures, all the gods. Elohim is plural, and everybody knows there were 12. Well, there were two different sets of 12 gods, and there were two creations, and there's two sets of beliefs that every nation had, whether it be Israel or the other nations. Look, Babylon and Sumerians, they had Yahweh, and they also had El, and Israel had El, and it had two forms of worship. It had Bethel, the house of El, and it had the tent of Yahweh that was at Shiloh that was removed. David built a house for Yahweh, David built a house for God in Jerusalem. But David was a high priest, not from the lineage of Aaron, but David had gone and gotten a teraphim, or not the teraphim, but the oracle, I should say, the ephod, which is how they would talk to God. He didn't get it from the Aaronite priesthoods or the Levitical priesthood, but he went and got it from Bethel. And there was a little city called the city of Nob, and there were some priests there that worshipped at Bethel. They were a higher order of priests, and they had the higher priesthood. The Bible tells you this in the Old Testament. It tells you this in the book of Hebrews, all the way through the Bible. And there were two covenants. We saw the two covenants there when El Elyon, God Most High, came and talked to Abraham, did not ask for sacrifices, did not ask him to kill his own son. It just made a promise. And I say this in all of my videos, but the Apostle Paul said that the law, which came in 430 years later, after the promise, did not make void the promise. So the law was added to. And that law came originally to try and enlighten mankind, but it's a story to explain how mankind wasn't ready. They threw their gold into the fire, and it came out this bull, and they got down on their knees and they worshipped idols. They didn't understand. So Moses veiled his face and veiled all these truths and made it a big parable. This happened partially in the New Testament too, because remember, the Apostle Paul, his name was originally Saul. And in all the ancient languages, Saul, that is the highest deity. Okay, sometimes it's El, and sometimes it's Sol. Ol, in every language, we have the word. Even in English, we have the word all. Well, there's nothing more in the universe but the all. And so that is the highest deity. The El, the all, the Olympus, or, the mountain of El, and the 12 Olympians, or the 12 gods that sat on that mountain, is exactly the same teaching in every religion. So in every religion, the priests understood that a great truth, that they maybe some of them did. You had to learn it. You had to learn the mysteries. We do not know whether, there's some indication that all these mysteries were given to us by gods and angels and stuff, but the priests didn't always understand it. They just performed their duties. They didn't really understand. And this is why idolatry got started, because people didn't understand. And so because they couldn't understand, because we were too egotistical, we hadn't evolved to a place where we could grasp it. That's just symbolic, the wrath of that particular God. It's just the fact that because people were blind and they were following their egotistical carnal desires, that they were dying. Okay, and it's put into a symbol as there was this God, see? So, in the esoteric wisdom, they teach about the two different creations, but most of that we haven't, as Christians, ever been privy to. We've only been taught the story of the Old Testament, which more or less, the way it's translated and the way we've been taught, it's just about this one deity who is the true deity. And if you worship that deity, then that's not idolatry. But if you worship any other deity, that is idolatry. But what we don't realize is that's not what the Old Testament ever taught. The Old Testament was teaching that we have to worship in spirit and in truth. And we have to understand these teachings are to explain a great, amazing truth that is very difficult to grasp. And it takes some time. And we learn by the things in which we suffer. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:40 explains the whole thing where we are transmigrating and advancing from birds from fish, birds to mammals to men. And then after we receive immortality, we still progress forever. Some as that of the sun, like the moon, or as the stars, and each star different star in glory. So it is an endless progression that the Apostle Paul speaks of. Jesus mentions a lot of this stuff. It's in the scriptures as well. But it's all very, very, if 2,000 years after Christ and after that Bible was written, we don't have any clue what they believed in those days. We only are told because the Christianity, the Catholic Church burned the Alexandrian library, all that ancient Babylonian wisdom, the Egyptian hieroglyphs became dead language, the cuneiform, all of it. We didn't know. We just thought there was this one God named Yahweh, the true God, and his son Jesus, but that's not what the Bible's teaching. Jesus came and said, your father's the devil. He's a murderer and a liar. Don't stone that woman. Why are you not keeping the Sabbath? Jesus says, my father keeps working until now. My father's above. My father's love. Your father's the liar and a murderer. Why you don't believe me? Because you're your father, the devil. You wish to do the desires of your father who was a murderer from the beginning. The truth was not in him. Jesus was saying, I want you to look behind the veil. Moses, the Apostle Paul says, when the children of Israel read the Old Testament, they read it with a veil over their faces. They don't understand. So the Apostle Paul says, with unveiled faces, we look into the most holy, where there was a curtain, right? It's been rent. We look into it with unveiled faces to behold the glory of God as though in a mirror. Now run that through your brain just a little bit and see what you come up with. As if in a mirror, we see the glory of God. As if in a mirror. What is this all about? The apostles were telling us the mystery. They were trying to explain that we shouldn't worship the four-footed beast, imagining that God is like an anthropomorphic being or a four-footed animal, and then their disgusting idolatry and their revelries and their drunken bouts they worshipped. And that had become a great idolatrous religion. Oh, there you go. See, you got to follow the God of the Old Testament, Dave, or you're an idolater. And that's not what the apostles said. The apostles condemned, as Jesus did, their deity, what they were doing, as idolatry. They were blind. They were blind guides leading the blind into a pit. They were murderers. They were murderers. How? Because he says the law is an accusation. It's a slander. What is this? Well, this is what the mysteries were trying to explain, that people misunderstood and began to worship the creature rather than the creator. And the Jews did it as well as every other nation on the face of the earth. They all had the same pantheon. They all had the Elohim. They all had Yah. Iyah, Inki. In the Old Testament, it's Yahweh Anoki. That's all the way through the Old Testament. The God of the Abyssios, or the bottom, or the bottomless pit. That's spoken of in Revelation 9, is coming up out of the bottom with the key to the bottomless pit. The devil who had the key to death and Hades. Abaddon, Abi, father. In Hebrew, his name is Abaddon. Abi, father, Adon. Which in a different tense of Adon would be Adonai or Adoni or Adon. But Abi, father, Adon is father Adonai. That was one of the names or a deity closely associated with Yahweh. Because you see, there were basically two you could say there are two religions, but it's not. First of all, we don't. All these words that we're using that confuses us. They do so because they don't mean what we think they mean. We say religion and we think we're, saying spiritual information, but that religion is wrong. It's like saying government, control, lies. Religion's not what we do. So we got to be very careful, because we're going to try and explain the truth. We have to be precise about what we're saying. We can't say hell when we mean heaven, but if the words have been all mistranslated and mixed up, we get very confused. So, in this video, I want to explain a little bit about the original truth. Where did it come from? Well, the Temple of On was in Egypt. And that is where the Great Pyramid was built. And that is where all the mysteries were. It was called the Pillar of Enoch. It was the Enochian mysteries. Because Enoch was the seventh in line from Adam and was given all these mysteries. And Adam had all these mysteries. And we don't know much about Adam, because all we have is this little Reader's Digest version called the Bible. And we've been totally deceived about it. But everything that's in that Bible is in all the other esoteric wisdoms all around the world. And whether it's Babylon, Egypt, Israel, or wherever, they all had idolatry, and they all had those who could discern and understand the meaning of this esoteric wisdom, and not get down and worship God as an idol, but understand the symbol. So, the New Testament tries to explain that God doesn't dwell in a building. That all these rituals and ceremonies, that's the problem. It's not the name of God. I mean, Yahweh means I am. Jesus said I am. But he didn't claim to be Yahweh, because you can say I am improperly. You can have the wrong consciousness. And so the Old Testament is materialism and the New is spiritual. So the Old Testament says, I am vengeance. I will not forgive your sins or pardon your error. I am jealous. That is my name. Jesus says, I am love, and I am the truth, and I am the way, and I am life. So we really have to start breaking this down. But what we need to do to find the answer is to go back to the very beginning and find the real truth, what's really going on. So as I said, early Christians were called Gnostics. And they even called themselves Gnostics at times. I mean, as a general definition. They didn't have a church called the Gnostic Church, right? There wasn't a church called the Church of God, or the Church of Yahweh, or the Church of El, or Methodism, or after somebody. I mean, even the Apostle Paul reprimands the Corinthians because some were following Apollos, and some were following Peter, and some were following Paul. And he said, did Paul die for your sins? We follow the Lord. So there is no, why people to this day divide up and say, I'm Lutheran, I'm Mormon, I'm Jehovah's Witness, I'm this, I'm that. It's all ridiculous. Why people today, after having the scriptures, the New Testament, think that somehow they can get to heaven by doing ceremonies and rituals and baptisms and communion and all these things? Well, because they think it says to do that in the Bible. But on this channel, we're explaining how we go through the New Testament and the Old and explain it and open these symbols up and go back over some of the words we've already looked at and realize, wait a minute, that's not what it really was saying. And I'll give you an example of that, hopefully, if we have time in this video, of just how you can read something and think it says something, but it doesn't. Oh, well, let me just go ahead and start in right there. Now, here's where we're going to start getting into some stuff that's blowing your mind, because I want to go back and find out or discuss what original Gnosticism was and what it is, and where it, because it goes back to the Sethian Gnostics is the oldest ones that we know of. The Ophites were an older version of Gnosticism, but even older than the Ophites. Remember, Ophites or Ophion is a serpent. So they were the serpent. The people call, some of the Gnostics were called, I don't know that they actually called themselves this, but they got to be known as Ophites. Probably because of people not understanding what the heck they were teaching. Because these were mysteries. Well, they murdered Jesus. Called him a blasphemer. See, the truth makes people angry because they don't understand it. Well, before the Ophites, well, I should say after the Ophites, there was Valentinian Gnosticism, and that 300, 400, 500 years after Christ. But we want to go where they used to believe that Gnostics were a form of Christianity, was an apostate form of Christianity. Because they were talking about Jesus. Must be after Jesus. All of this Gnosticism came after Jesus. And somehow it was written, it was made up to be a counterfeit religion, another false religion, another idolatry and blasphemous and all this. Well, the truth is that was Christianity at point that 300 or 400 years after Christ it became blasphemous and idolatrous. These ancient Gnostics were scientists, and their teachings they didn't worship serpents. Well, you believe serpents can talk? Well, that's what it says in Genesis chapter 2. But see, you've got to understand the symbolism. So before the Ophites were these Sethian Gnostics. Now, that's as far back as scholars understand. They don't grasp this, that's not a religion. They didn't say this is a religion and we build churches and got steeples and up on the top of the door it says Ophite or Sethian Gnostics. That's what we are. No. The Essenes that were out in the desert, that Jesus was baptized by John, because John was an Essene. Before Christ came, they kept those rituals. They did ceremonies. They had temples. But they did not worship at Jerusalem. And those Essenes were Gnostics. And this has become very clear from the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were very Gnostic. Yes, there were different groups of Gnostics that taught in different ways, but they all had the same pantheon of deities and talk about the same truths. And that's what we're going to get into here in a second. We've already gone 30 minutes, so I can't believe we've taken that long just to get to this introduction here. But as we always do, because it takes a while to set this up. So really what Gnosticism is just those who were the knowers, self-knowledge. They didn't believe in rituals and temples. Well, back in the day, the material form of religion always won, or religion or government always won, because there's always people out there that want to deceive you and control you. And they can do that by making you believe things, or scaring you, or making you think that if you don't get down and bow down to this god or this idol or whatever, you can't be saved, and you don't get favors from the king and the government, and it's just give us taxes, and it's a way to keep us ignorant, because there are those in the universe that want to keep us deceived, and it's not like there's a group of gods that want to do this, that somehow hate mankind. No, that's not really what it is. This is a symbol about why there is good and evil in the world, and why, if God loves us, we suffer. Because we start off, we have to understand what the universe is, what we are. And the only way you can understand what the universe is, imagine let's say that Einstein's relativity is true, or quantum physics. Let's say quantum physics is the truth. And you go to a tribe out in the desert, and they're all running around in tootsie skirts because they don't have, they're just living in the woods. They're people. They're not ignorant, but they've not learned science much. They're more interested in catching a fish to feed themselves and weave a rug. So they haven't sat and contemplated all this false knowledge. They just have ancient spiritual truth that they know within themselves. So if somebody wanted to teach, true advanced beings wanted to teach mankind why they're on this planet and suffering, and why there's bugs, and why there's bad things and snakes, and people die, and why do people die, and where do we go when we die, and all that stuff. How would you explain to somebody that this world is a hologram, that it's not real? Why, a caveman would bang his head against a wall and say, well, it's real to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't agree with you. I don't understand. All I know is I got to go fishing and catch some fish or I'm going to die. Right? I'm going to teach my children how to hunt and fish. And so the best you could do is get them to say, well, give thanks and eat your fish. Right? Because it'd be very difficult to understand or to teach them what spirit is. So what they did is they gave them the word wind. In the Old Testament and the New, spirit is the word wind, or it's an invisible force. So you see right there, the word's symbolic to try and explain to the mind. When you're teaching people using a language to try and explain to the mind a greater truth that you can't explain. So you say, well, it's the wind, because something in nature can be likened into what the reality might be. It's an invisible, powerful force that today we call energy, but they didn't understand what you say. Oh, now let's see, young man, it's energy. And you're like, energy? What's energy? It's like the wind. It blows and you feel its presence. It's very powerful, can knock over trees and buildings, but you don't see it. Oh, what? So I have wind in me? Yes, originally the God who is living forever breathed into you his breath, and that give you this energy, this power, this immortality. Well, why did I lose it? Because you're a sinner. Well, that's all they could understand. But it's not really the truth. So, you see, the priests wrote very carefully this symbolic, this parable. That if you understand the parable, and not as a literal thing, but if you understand the symbols, in there it doesn't say that you sinned. But the literal, the ignorant may teach that. But that's not what it's really saying. It's saying that because you can't see the spiritual, it doesn't make it weak. The wind can be the most powerful thing. Look at sunlight. You don't really see sunlight except for maybe in a glare or when it shines out through the clouds or something. You might see a streak or a rainbow. But generally, just looking out into the air, it's all light and bright. It's the air. You don't see the air or the light that's shining down through the air. So the light is shining through the air and you don't see it. But yet that light is providing the energy to make the plants grow. So it's the spiritual that is more powerful, that is greater than the physical. The physical grows and is nourished by the spiritual, which is the invisible. And so you use these illustrations to explain to people that this body that they're living in is temporary and that this is just a classroom. The problem is that in the explanation that this ancient priesthood in Egypt, the temple of An or Anu, or in the Greek it's Uranus, it's a sort of an upgrade. It's not the same God as Anu, really. Uranus is or light and Anu heaven. So it's the light of heaven, even higher than the heavens itself. Because it says that our Father in heaven dwelleth in unapproachable light. So he's probably talking about, it's talking about consciousness, higher existence and being. You might liken it to the center of anything, which is the source, where the light shines out like the galaxy or the universe or a solar system. But you see, they didn't understand, they didn't have telescopes, they couldn't see galaxies, they didn't know what a galaxy was, they didn't know what a sun was and planets. So you were teaching people about stars and moons. They didn't know what they were. Sometimes they thought, well, that's God then, the light? Oh, the sun is the God. And they get down and they worship the sun. Well, and then the person that's teaching them would say, oh, no. You don't worship, that's just the material. He said, wait a minute, you told me that the God was light and God was the wind. And no. The wind and light may very well be the divine being, or at least closer to the divine being than the material. But even the material is the expression of the light. But that it's like a clothing. You can take it off and put it on. You don't have to be frightened of the material, because the material looks like it rots and dies and comes back and goes away, and it's scary, and there's snakes and things can hurt you, and you can break your leg, and it's all this scary stuff. But there is something immortal in the universe that you are, and that's your being, your thoughts. So it was difficult to explain all this. So what they did was that they put this information down because they knew that one day man would be capable of, line upon line, we'd get to a place where mankind would be capable of understanding much more. We would have higher form of math. We would have the ability to understand with maybe calculus or whatever. We have better telescopes. We can see planets up close. We find out what they are. We start getting a better idea of the cosmology of the universe. And we have history, and we can write all this down, and all the philosophers can write their information down, and prophets can come, and experiences can happen. We learn by the things in which we suffer. So one day we'd be able to learn this. So they wrote it all down. They put it in a temple. And they wrote it on the walls of the temple. And they made diagrams, and they made symbols, and there were crosses. Some people didn't know what the cross meant. They got down and worshiped the cross. Well, the high priest knew that that had something to do with astronomy, that there was a point in the sky where the sun would be either, like Jesus represented the sun there. When Jesus walked on the water, that was the sun that when it came down to the horizon, actually walked on the water. And sometimes they use that as an illustration. And they said, okay, so originally mankind wanted to know who created the world. So they said, well, originally it was God, the divine being, the divine existence, the reality, the spirit, the actual mind, the being created the manifestation. And they're like, the being? Oh, so we worship the being, huh? Oh, holy the being. Oh, holy the being. No. That's not his name, the being. Oh, well, what is his name? Well, he has no name. Oh, holy has no name. Oh, holy has no name. No. That's not his name either. So you see, certain nations might have worshipped different aspects because they had an entire cosmology to explain the universe. So they said, all right, here's how you can understand the universe. The highest of all there is the monad, or the one. In every language, they gave. It's not like the gods or the advanced beings didn't want us to know. They wanted us to know, but we couldn't understand it. So if they said, all right, we're going to give you a language so that you can sort of, like math, so you can figure all this out. If you have a language, you can communicate. Well, there was a being, that's Yahweh, who didn't want us to know. So he scattered us all over the world and divided our languages and, and that kind of thing. He didn't want Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and all of that. But the real divine being wanted us to know, and he wrote it in a temple, and he wrote it down, he explained it to us. And he said, all right, so I'm going to give you a language, and we have this word called, a word we say in just about every language, it's all, or it's ol, or el, or in some languages it might be sol. Now this comes down to us in many ways, salut, which is the highest. You put your hand on your head. The highest of all is the sol, which is the soul, which is the being, which is you. And it's the highest. So you say hell, hello, H is silent, L, the Elohim, or the Heliopolis, or the Helios. The Greeks called the sun Helios. That's hell, or Elio, or El, the highest. But it was the highest light. Helios was the highest sun, not the, wasn't necessarily just the the light from the physical sun. But all of the languages had this, the root word for God was all. In every language. Soul, all, el, helios. Just about every language. And so we use it in everyday speech as the highest. So sometimes you'd say, well, the top of the day to you, sir. Salutation, Sol. And in the elemental chart, salt's way up the line. Like helium, salt. So it was up, that was a word, it meant the highest. So all the word, names of gods were not always the names of the highest. Because after the all, you want to understand the universe. Well, you can't just say, well, the universe is the all. Well, what is the all? Okay, so now we got to dissect the all and explain what the all is. Because you've got to have something. We've gone through this many, many, many times, but this is a great scientific treatise. It's basically what's come down to us, this esoteric wisdom, to explain the all. Well, the all wasn't even really even a being per se. It's incomprehensible. Nobody knows what it is because it encompasses the all. And no one can comprehend the all. So they would say, if you want to understand some very hard problem, you got to have a very complicated math. You got to have tools, right? So here's what we're going to do. You carry the 1, you bring down the 3, and see, oh, now you can do a much larger mathematical problem. Oh, algebra will get you even further. Or how about calculus? So you got to have a way to understand. You can't just say, oh, it's the all. So what they did is they wrote a circle, and they cut it in half, and now you got 2, left and right, male and female. Now that second thing you've done, just by one line, by cutting in half, making one line, because the first thing is just a dot or just one circle. The second thing, you make one line through it, and now, boom, you got 2 things. So there's 1, now there's 2. That's numerology. But it's also language. So all, and the next word is to, or do, day, or dual, deity, Dawood, David, divine, deity. All of these words have to do with, obviously, God or deity, but not the highest. Not the highest. That is the duality. And that deity had different names. They were not names like, remember, even humans originally weren't named just some name. Oh, we'll call this one David, and we'll call that one Susie, and that one Mary. The names meant something in their language. Like Native Americans would say, this daughter of ours, we'll call her running water, right? Or light upon a summer's day, or 2 deer walking, or it described that child. It was a name that described him. So the names of the gods they're not different gods, it's descriptions of what the universe came from. And so, yes, the universe came from a being. At some point, there had to be being. So once the 2 came out of the 1, it may have been, in a sense, male and female. That's a person. And so therefore, the first, in the ancient teachings, the first thing that came from the Modad was what they called Barbella. Now, in Gnosticism, which, remember, is the ancient esoteric Egyptian esoteric wisdom that was written in the temples, it was handed down by the pharaohs, and finally, when the Greeks came down there in 300, they leveled Heliopolis to the ground, and they took all the books and took it to Alexandria, and that became the greatest, seventh wonder of the world, or whatever this huge temple where the people would go, the priests, and they would have libraries, and they would study all this ancient wisdom. Well, when the Greeks went down there, they wanted to know too. Remember, there were two. This is where it gets complicated, and I have to stop for a moment to explain something. Egypt, there were two Egypts. There was southern Egypt and northern. The northern Egypt was Israel. That's where they were for 500 years. The southern Egypt, they called Ethiopia, but it's always also called Egypt. And everything along the Nile, all the way down southern Africa, was called Egypt along the Nile at times. But usually they referred to the southern part as Ethiopia. So there were two pharaoh lines. And so Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they were all trying to join the two kingdoms, unite the world. And these became symbols of the two ways of thought as well. The lower part of the river would be down at the base of your spine, the lower sexual, carnal, beliefs and stuff like that. And they would perhaps, remember the Judeans, Jesus said, your father's the devil. They were in southern Israel. There were 12 tribes, and they were just two tribes that were at the southern part, the bottom of the wheel. And their god was the devil. Capricorn or Saturn or whatever you want to call it. Kronos, or in whatever religion, Ea, Inki, over the Abyssios, or Yahweh Enoki, who thought he was God. All right, but let's find out where this material world came from. Well, it came from the monad, who split into Bar-Belos. What is Bar-Belos? Bar, in Aramaic, is sun. Belos, that is Baal, or Bel in the Babylonian tongue. And when they worshiped this god in Egypt, they called it Belo. So Bar-Belo in the Armenian, as it came down to them, was son of Baal, or Baal the sun. And so Bar-Belos was called the androgynous being. You've probably seen a lot of pictures about the occult, how they worship the devil, and he's androgynous, and it's male and female, and it's so evil and so wicked. No. That's what people did who didn't understand, who came along and saw these fertility rites. That was something that humans did. That was idolatry, rituals, ceremonies. You see, in the ancient truth, there was this great virgin mother who was Barbelo. She was the first mother. There was no male. She was the first person. Some people call the monad a father, but it wasn't male or female. So the first being was a female. But this first being was also, in a sense, androgynous, because out of her own self, they call her a female, but yet sometimes they called her thrice male. And this is where we get Hermeticism, being thrice magistus, thrice majestic, because the son of the virgin carried those same titles. But we've lost all this information. We didn't know who this woman was, the virgin who gave birth to the world, because you see, in Jerusalem, in Israel, all we have left of the Old Testament, Israel was scattered into all the world, the ones that worshipped at Bethel. And they wrote stuff in the Bible too. But when the Judeans came back from captivity from Babylon, they followed the Yahweh cult, the materialistic, the old carnal commandments. And they didn't understand the spiritual. So they lost that part. And so Christianity has done the same thing. We've gone back, as the Apostle Paul says, we've gone back like a dog to its vomit. We've disowned the Lord who bought us. We Judaized. You who want to be under the law. Do you not know it's slavery? Do you not understand that the law is spiritual? That the letter of the law killeth? That nobody can be saved with this understanding of the material ways and the carnal nature? That is just idolatry and revelry and fertility rites and ceremonies and worshiping the creation rather than the creator? That's what Christianity is. It's not like, we have a God and his name is Bobby, And if you don't say Bobby correctly and spell it correctly, and then you can't be say, that's just literalism. What we want to do is, if you have a language where in your language, the monad, you say all, we'll say that God is all. But if you're in your religion, or if you have a language, the Yahweh didn't want you to understand, so he divided the world in all the languages, and he may have given you a language where the highest word you can think of is soul. Well, all right, then soul. Okay, or maybe it's monad, or maybe it's this, or maybe the one. See, the one, that's another word that is similar to an or anu, una, uno in Spanish, uno, dos. See, all the languages are similar, but the ana is heaven or highest. And so that's another word for the highest. But it doesn't matter what religion or nation or language you are in, if you've got a workable system, and all of the nations did, they had a priesthood, and those priests were trying to understand the meanings. They didn't always understand it. This is why when Christ came, he revealed the mysteries. And the apostle says it's once and for all revealed by the apostles and prophets. The holy mysteries. They explained them. They didn't say, oh, now, my son, we come to explain to you that God is Yahweh, and you have to spell it Y-A-W. No, it's Yahovah, or no, it's L, and you spell it E-L. None of that. They spoke in the language that they were in. The world was a Greek world at that time. So they used the Greek word. And the Greek god, generally they called it Zeus, and his father, Uranus. And Jesus said, my Father in heaven. That's in the Greek New Testament, translating the words Uranus. Uranus was the god, the Greek god, and the Romans called him Jupiter. Jupiter means Deus Pater, Father Zeus. And so Zeus in the Sumerian was Enlil. And that's An and El, the highest god. Well, in in some, well, so these words, sometimes they would have two words to say something, like son of Anu. So it wouldn't just be Anu, it'd be Baranu or something like that. Well, in this case, it's Baal. Baal, now it's not Yahweh, and I know Yahweh didn't like Baal because the flesh doesn't like the spirit. But Baal was the sky god, the heaven god. Baal, or Bel, or Belos, was not the monad, not the highest, but it was the one, the great virgin, Belos, who gave birth to the only begotten Son. And this was the divine Trinity. Now, we know that that's what the New Testament is teaching, this Gnostic teaching, because these Gnostics, we have dug up their books that are older than Christianity. The Sethian Gnostics are older than Christianity. And Pythagoras was talking about this. He went down and learned from Solon and Thales, the Egyptian priesthood. And Pythagoras was probably these what they call philosophers. They weren't religious. It wasn't a religion, but they learned the ancient esoteric wisdom, and they taught it. And there were philosophers called Gnostics that were bringing this in. What they did was they had mystery schools. They weren't religions, they were schools. And the Essenes was a mystery school. And they taught all of this, maybe in their language, which was, maybe they were speaking in Greek or Aramaic or whatever it was. So sometimes they had different words, but it's all the same teachings. There was this Elohim, which is plural. But now that's a different story. And I'm already 60 minutes, so we're going to have to probably do another video on this. But what I'm going to do, this is just to sort of whet your appetite, because in the next video, and I had actually planned on probably getting into this in this video, but I see it's going to take more than one video to explain this. I want to get into what Gnosticism really was, how it began, how it was taught by Jesus, and how we know, because the New Testament says that Jesus is the only begotten. Well, that expression is not from the Old Testament. That is from the Gnostics, from Egypt. The idea that he would be born of the Virgin came from Egypt, the Gnostic, Sethian Gnosticism. Seth, you see, Seth was the son of Adam. So Sethian Gnosticism, the Egyptians knew about Adam and Seth. And they explained in their temples and their priesthood, they had this explanation, and they explained who Yahweh was too. Because when the only begotten was made or birthed from the great Holy Virgin, so remember, Mother Mary represents Barbalos, and Jesus' wife, the prostitute, right? They call her the prostitute, Mary Magdalene. She wasn't a prostitute. This is where we're getting this all. This is not a description of some prostitute on the street. Mary Magdalene, Mary means priest. And she was the high priestess of the temple in Alexandria, in Egypt. And that was Jesus' sister. And Jesus became a pharaoh because she anointed him to become a pharaoh. And in that ancient religion, in that temple, they acted out this great drama of the creation of the universe. From the monad to the great Virgin Mother, and then the only begotten who marries the prostitute, and that is the one who, in our Bible, we call Sophia. Now, you see, there's the two women. It's always that way, whether it's the Sumerian, Babylon, Egyptian, as we said. There's Astarte, Aphrodite, and then there's also the Inanna, the higher mother, the great Holy Virgin. And so Mary didn't have to be a virgin, actually. Jesus didn't have to be born without a father on the earth. He's going to be a person. He's going to be born into the world. He might have had an actual father. But they were in the temple being appointed and being initiated as the Son of God on earth. The Pharaoh was the Son of God. And the word Pharaoh means the house of God. Now you can say the Son of David, or you can say the house of David, or you can say the Son of God or the house of God. But that's what that Pharaoh means. And so the reigning Pharaoh was always the God on earth, very God of very God. The reincarnation of Horus, who was the rebirth of Osiris, which was one of these original things that we talk about in Gnosticism that we'll get to in the next video. And so when you say that Mary was a virgin, you're saying she was the highest high priestess in that temple that represented the Barbelos, or the great holy son of Baal, the god of heaven, which corresponds to Zeus in Greek thought. So in the New Testament, it says God in Greek, theos. That's the spelling of Zeus. That's the general spelling. When you spell Zeus, theos, you're saying that was the general word they had for God, or deity itself, the divine. But, other words have come down to us, like deity, which is very close to the Daoud, or the divine, or the all those words. Or, different words. But they may have, if you knew and understood Gnosticism, or the ancient esoteric wisdom, you'd be able to understand in the great pantheon what part of the divine nature that represents. Because there's the great divine Holy Trinity. And beyond that, there's more than just the Trinity. Because after, then you have the other woman, who's not really a part of the high Holy Grand Trinity, but was from the light. Because, you see, Barbalos and her son, the only begotten, they made these 7 emanations from the one, from the monad, the 7 kingdoms. And at the very end, the 7th, they created Sophia. Sophia became or wisdom. See, wisdom was created. So in the whole, in the monad, is everything. There's wisdom in there and everything. And out from it came all of these parts of the, like you say, at first it just was split in half. You got the male and the female, or the great holy virgin who produces the only begotten, or the creation, the third person of the Trinity. And then they manifest the 7 deities who are of the Father in the light, the creators, because you can't create without wisdom. That's part of, like it says in Proverbs chapter 8, I am with the Father from the beginning. I am the great architect of the universe. So Sophia is that great woman. Why is she called a prostitute? Because you see, she decided to create the world. And the world was chaos. And she made Aldabaoth. And we're going to explain that. Yaldabaoth, that in the Armenian language means Yaldabaoth, means the son of chaos. And it explains in the Gnostic teachings that was Yahweh. One of his names is Sabaoth, or Samael, which we call Satan. And it gives those names. Anyway, then it shows how this God went on to create the other 12 gods that formed the physical material world, or astrology, or the physical house, the temple. And because he was not from the light, but he was created in the physical world, he did not know that there was light. He only knew the physical. He was the ego, the lower ego, and he didn't know. And he said, I am God and there is none else, because he was blind. And then he created this world, and that is the story of the carnal world and how it came to be and why we suffer and why we're in the dark and why this God is ruling over us. He's blind, and where did he come from and where are we going? But you see, if we're going to find out in the next video who we are, because you see, we are Adim, and we were actually made before Yahweh. We are greater than Yahweh. We dwelled in the light. And that's what we're going to get into in the next video. And this is what the New Testament's about, because it gives you the words, logos. Why does it say in the beginning was a word? Because that's Gnosticism. That came from Pythagorean Gnosticism, or which is what Philo, right? The great Jewish Alexandrian priest, Philo, he wrote about Gnosticism and the logos. How did all this find its way in the New Testament? Because, you see, just like Essenes were before, John the Baptist of the school of Elijah, or the school of the prophets, a Gnostic, esoteric believers out in the desert. So there were esoteric wisdom in different groups all around the world. In Jerusalem, they were called Ebionites, Nazarenes, and in Egypt, they were called Therapeutai. And that was the ancient esoteric wisdom, the great pharaohs that taught Pythagoras, or the Greeks. And they, when they came in 300, then they began to learn the priesthood. And there's a whole bunch as to why that happened. And there's so many things we can go into, and we've covered some of it, bits and pieces in the past. But in the next video, I want to really get into what Gnosticism is, how we know that that's what the New Testament is about, and how we can know the truth. And the truth will make us whole, and we'll understand, and we'll be awakened. And how that's so important for those who are living today, because we've got to wake up, because the time is here. We're about to go into a great time of trouble, and we've got to be able to know and navigate our way through this. And the gospel of the kingdom of God must be preached in all the inhabited earth for a witness to all the nations before the end will come. And so we've got to unravel all of this and understand it. Man, I know that there's a lot of things I touched on, and you're probably interested in knowing. Well, you have to wait till the next video, because we've already gone over an hour, and we're going to have to wait till tomorrow to finish this. So until tomorrow, guys, I hope you guys have a great day, and it's good to be back, and have a good one.